75% of people think real estate agents aren't very trustworthy. The only way to change that perception is to change the reality. If you're looking for a career where integrity matters and you can guide others through tough, high-stakes decisions, come join us at Story Real Estate and help drive that 75% down to zero. I'm Chris, the owner and founder. Let's see if we have a career you'll love.
Return of the gods.
No.
I want to say of the strong gods. I want to say
just any gods.
Hey, I was gonna parlay this into Return of the Mac, but
Return of the Mac.
there you go. Hey, y'all, welcome to Cause Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Pastor Toby, Chuck Knox. I'm the Water Boy. It's good to be with you. And if you want to make sense out of anything that just happened there, you got to stick around for the interview.
Apparently, yes.
What's gonna happen.
Hey, the Fight Laugh Feast conference is like no other. No other conference you've been to.
No,
what other Christian conference do you know where it kicks off with beer and psalms? Come on. Yeah, I'd like to see hands if you know of any other conference like that. Fight Laugh Feast Conference is a gathering of rowdy Christians from all walks of life, from all over the country, who want to glorify God and build God-honoring families, businesses, churches, and see our nation bow to King Jesus. This year's conference, I don't read the AI one. This is an AI one. I can tell. Somebody ran this.
They did start off with AI.
No,
AI wouldn't have written that first part.
I'm done with that part.
Yep.
This year's conference is on the politics of six-day creation. Human society begins in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. If we get that wrong, we get it all wrong. So buckle up as we fight, laugh, and feast. Beer and Psalms, amazing lineup of speakers at the Ark Encounter. October 11th through the 14th. So go to fightlaughfeast.com and sign up today, fightlaughfeast.com. One more ad real quick before we introduce our special guest.
And this is even more important.
I mean, seriously. This is awesome. I love ads like this. I love it when people send us these ads. Yep. The Cummings family is hosting a hymn sing Sunday, October 1st from 5 to 8 p.m. in Tulsa.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Hey, I'm so proud of Oklahoma.
But wow, you're saying that? Texas Gang, you're saying that. Hey, join them if you're passionate about worshiping God in music or just want to sing traditional hymns in an informal setting. Email Christopher at ChristopherandMary@gmail.com. ChristopherandMary@gmail.com for their address, west of Tulsa, Oklahoma. They've got some extra hymnals. Maybe if you have some, you can bring them. They're using the 1961 Trinity hymnals.
Oh,
great. Mary is going to have a baked potato. Excuse me, don't interrupt the baked potato bar, sir. This is important. Dessert and coffee. You're not required to bring any food.
Baked potato dessert
but you may bring potato toppings or dessert if you would like to do so. Bring lawn chairs in case we run out of room. ChristopherandMary@gmail.com. ChristopherandMary@gmail.com for him saying October 1st.
Feel God right there.
October 1st, 5 to 8 p.m. I love it. It's awesome. Go sing hymns and psalms in Tulsa.
So potatoes are dessert in Oklahoma?
And dessert. We're very grateful to have with us today on the show Mr. Rusty Reno. He's the editor of First Things Magazine, which if you don't know about First Things Magazine, I don't know what to tell you. Former professor of theology and ethics at Creighton University, author of the newish book, it's been out for a couple of years, Return of the Strong Gods, Nationalism, Populism, and the Future of the West. Rusty, thanks for joining us on Cross Politic.
Hey, great. Listening to your description of your conference, it puts me in mind of my Dominican friends. They have a bluegrass band called Hillbilly Thomists, and their headlining song is Bourbon, Bourbon, Bluegrass, and the Bible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I think we're all tapping into some of the same good spirits, so to speak.
Well, Rusty, appreciate you coming on the show. This book is it's been making the rounds, and it's actually
remaking the rounds.
Yeah, remaking the rounds, and grateful for your work on it. Just introduce our audience to this idea of the strong gods. What do you mean by the strong gods? And since the title is Return of the Strong Gods, what happened to them, and why are they coming back now?
Well, strong gods is a metaphor for the strong loves and loyalties that, motivate us to come together and pursue grand projects, or maybe not so grand projects. I mean, obviously, marriage is a kind of strong God. It calls for us to, put down our self-interest and serve, the one we love, and to build our families. And nation is a strong God. Truth is a strong God. And obviously, the real God, the one true God, is the strongest God of them all. And so, this is just basically the stuff of human commitment. And what happened was that after World War II, a consensus really emerged that, these loyalties and commitments and loves can become very destructive. And that's true. They can become destructive. And so we developed a kind of cultural program of trying to weaken these gods and make people less passionate, in effect. And we saw that in a kind of what I call the open society consensus that emerged, which I'm sure I would have supported in 1950. But over the decades, it's become a kind of flesh-eating consensus where we're not allowed to believe anything passionately. And I think a pedagogy that emphasizes critique is a good example of that. Also, kind of a pervasive irony and cynicism is another sign of evidence of the triumph of the open society consensus. And we've reached a point where so much has been disintegrated that people have no solid place to stand. And I interpret populism or the sort of Trump phenomenon, nationalism, Hungary, Poland, Giorgia Meloni, and Italy, is that people hunger for these strong loves that unite us. And so we're seeing a politics that's evolving that I think suggests a return of the strong gods.
Rusty, is this fundamentally different than the overarching Enlightenment project? I think of the Enlightenment and as a major project saying religion and the love of gods and faith and things like that. That's what causes all our conflict in the world. Is this sort of a reiteration of that project post World War?
No, because the Enlightenment was that the God of truth was going to supplant the false God of the Bible, the true God. A lot of these Enlightenment figures were deists.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't a God, but it was a high and noble ideal that we were going to serve. People like Immanuel Kant and the starry skies above and the inner voice of conscience within. And I think that open society consensus is really, as we've seen in the postmodern kind of disintegration of the idea of truth, that we're in a post-truth environment. We're not supposed to believe anything strongly in our present consensus. So non-judgmentalism, Pope Benedict spoke of the dictatorship of relativism. It's paradoxical. So one of my friends criticized me with the notion that isn't political correctness a strong God of sorts? And I see it as a kind of obligatory weakening. Everybody has to kind of renounce all their strong convictions. And we police each other. We police convictions.
This is
lawn signs, hate has no home, and hate has no home here. They're all, now you're right, there's a kinship with this Enlightenment attack on Christianity, but it's broadened into an attack on really any kind of anchoring truth.
Got it.
I'm writing down here, and these are not the questions that I intended to ask, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, it seems like the weak gods seem pretty strong.
Which ones are you thinking of?
Well, I'm thinking of
Multiculturalism,
LGBTQ stuff. There's a lot of.
We'll both back up here. I mean, so what do we got here? It's everybody has to be accepted in exactly the way they want to be accepted. Yes, I mean, these are urgent imperatives, but they depend upon how can everybody be accepted in the way they want to be accepted. You get to use whatever pronoun you want to use. If anybody has strong convictions, so we're all supposed to kind of bracket our actual convictions. We have a biblical view about what it means to be human. We're not supposed to bring that into the public square because that'll prevent people from being accepted. They want to be accepted. So it's a certain kind of. It's not an accident. It's called political correctness and not moral correctness, because the political is at an arm's length from our inner convictions. Am I making sense here? But this line of criticism has been, I think, pressed on me by many.
Okay.
But I think it's a kind of obligatory. Everybody's got to be accepted, and everybody has to be non-judgmental. We get heavily policed to make sure that we adopt this open society consensus.
Can I piggyback on that question?
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, my one follow up on that is so I think I get exactly what you're talking about and appreciate it. And I think the one thing that has kind of bugged me though a little bit is when I think of strong gods. Strong loyalties, strong allegiances. I think of the willingness to die and the willingness to kill. And so you think of, despite the wickedness of paganism, they would sacrifice to their gods. People would die because of their loyalties and their allegiances to their gods. And it's in this era of the weak gods that we murdered 65 million babies. How do you hold those two things together?
Well, but we don't. I mean, the people who support the right to abortion, they don't acknowledge this. It's all hidden from view. Another would be the pandemic. I mean, the God of health. Is it a strong God or a weak God? I think it's a God of weakening. In other words, we're going to. I mean, what is health? It's a pretty small. It's precisely what makes us anxious and fearful. So I'd say the pandemic is a kind of, obviously it was very lockdowns and things like that. These were very much draconian methods that used the power of the state to control us. But towards what end? Was it a high end or was it a low end? Survival. I don't think of survival as being, that's not a God that can motivate us to make sacrifices. It's not a goal. It's not a God that can evoke in us a sacrifice of ourselves.
Except though, it seems like that's what they did with the vaccine.
How so?
Well, they have this experimental drug that hasn't been tested, and they brought themselves to the altar of the God to get shot with its, I don't know, it's like a form of communion almost.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I mean, they didn't tell people that it was dangerous. They told people it was safe. So yes, a lot of stuff was sold to us in that. But how did it come about that the American people would be so fearful and so easily cowed? I think part of my book is an attempt to explain how we've gotten to the point where we have no solid place to stand. But you have to have a solid place to stand. If you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything, as the country music song goes. And there's a lot of truth in that commonplace wisdom.
I'm going to ask, just to follow up here. So then what is destructive about strong gods? Because you made the assertion earlier that you thought that there was something that it could be destructive to have strong gods. And so there's a warning there, I heard. But what is it that is destructive about the strong gods? Because it seems like your book, they're returning. So have we learned anything from previous generations of having strong gods?
It's really important that you worship the one true God, because he puts he puts these other lesser loves in their proper order. You know, love of family is a noble thing, but it's not the highest thing. Love of country is a noble thing, but it's not the highest thing. And so that's why it's so important, I think, the Christian influence on our nation is very much receded, especially among our ruling elite. It was so important because it gave a proper order to our loves.
That's good. That's really good.
And so then when those loves,
so I'm concerned. I mean, I have some sympathy. I mean, I voted for Donald Trump. I'm sympathetic to the populist impulse, but I have sympathy with my friends who are very fearful because our nation is very de-Christianized. And in that kind of atmosphere, disordered loves can gain the upper hand.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the voice of Christians in the public square is so important. Because we remind people, yes, these are, you're right for your heart to be won by patriotic love and certainly by loyalty to your family. These are so what you're hungering for is correct. But it has to be put in its proper place.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about. I think part of our line of questioning is we're assuming strong gods win, weak gods lose, but is part of what you're arguing is like you need strong gods for a thriving society, and weak gods are for is society that won't last. You can't build off weak gods. Is that kind of
how are you going to get people to make? How are you going to get the wealthy oligarchs in our society to sacrifice their self-interest for the sake of the future of our nation? You know, Apple's got a huge investment in China. It's going to be very painful. Deglobalization, which is now happening, is a very painful process for the folks who have made tremendous fortunes in the globalized economy. And there have to be these unifying loves for a society to unite. And people say, yes, I'm going to do this for the sake of what I care about more than my own balance sheet or my own self-interest. Without strong gods, people are atomized and they wind up turning in upon their own self-interests. And then it's a kind of, there's no underlying social capital, so to speak, to use that technical terminology, that we can fall back on to meet external challenges as a nation.
All right, I want to know what's so bad about multiculturalism? Isn't it good?
It's an ideology of empire. You can't have a democracy unless people are united in common loves. And if they're united in common loves, and it ain't a multiculture, it's a single culture, because it's the loves we share that define our culture. And I think, the American love is one of them is really powerful, and it's a love of freedom. In fact, I think strong gods are necessary for freedom, because you can only be free if you can say no to the principalities and powers that rule this world, including the government. And you can only say no if you've got a solid place to stand. And part of the open society consensus was to create freedom. And on the surface, it seems like it will weaken all this moral norms. We'll legalize marijuana. We can have you can marry whomever you want. Whether it's a man or a woman, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like an expansion of freedom, but by undermining these strong cultural norms, we really get people don't have a strong place. They don't have a solid place to stand, and no solid place to stand means you're going to be racked with anxiety. I'm not going to have enough money for retirement. I can't afford to take a stand on this issue because I'll lose my job. Yeah. Or people will shame me on social media. So you need a stiff spine in our current society to stand against a lot of these negative trends. Not surprisingly, it's religious folks. I mean, you don't have to be religious to recognize the difference between a man and a woman.
Right.
I mean, just all you got to think is class and biology.
Right.
But But it's not an accident that it's religious folks who are the ones who are most visible opponents of transgender ideology. Why? Because we actually have this strong love. And our faith gives us a very solid, it's a supernaturally solid place to stand.
That's really helpful to, I like the way you address the question about multiculturalism as a shared love. I think what frequently happens is
multiculturalism is not a shared love.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm saying, but I think that's the answer. You're saying the answer is,
look, if I was advising the 1,000 richest people in the United States, how do you make the American people as docile and supine as possible? I would say, just make them as multicultural as possible, because they can't. Then they won't be able to unite to resist the power of the elite.
Yeah.
That's why I said multiculturalism is the ideology of empire.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
It's also false. People say, "Oh, the United States is a very multicultural country." Look, you get some foreigner to come and they say, "Good grief, Americans all think the same," and it's a black, brown, white, yellow. It doesn't matter. We got a very shallow culture, society, American culture. It's shallow, but it sure is wide, and it's very powerful. And the children of immigrants get Americanized, often into the shallowest kind of consumerist mass culture imaginable. But we're all recognizably, not everyone. I mean, a lot of people come to this country and they bring with them their own culture. But as I'm saying, their children get socialized pretty darn quick. So I'm a kind of an American optimist.
Yeah,
I think if we could get rid of some of this multicultural ideology, we could begin the process of trying to figure out what it is that we share and recognize what we share.
I was just going to say, I think that frequently the accusation is if you're against multiculturalism, you're a racist. Right? I mean, that's the accusation.
That's where I was going, yeah.
And I think it's helpful.
Isn't it the other way around?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it's actually helpful the way that you're coming back at it and saying, actually, what you're trying to do is you're trying to have us have less love for good things, which ultimately is going to end up being hateful.
Well, I just presume that my fellow Americans share my love of our country.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what race they are, whatever that means, race. It doesn't matter what race they are. I just presume they love our country. Now, sometimes you're wrong, but usually you got to have an advanced degree at a fancy pants university not to love our country. And it has more to do with your social class than it has to do anything to do with your race or ethnic origin.
It seems, though, that the conversation, at least the one that I see happening on social media, when somebody says multiculturalism, the way that they're defining that usually is by saying race, right? Like race is multicultural. That's what they're thinking of. And so when people, and I've watched this happening, because at first, even for me, maybe this is just because I have I'm still getting out of the Enlightenment moment. I'm still developing outside of the post-World War II consensus. I'm still coming out of that. But because it's such the common way of communicating, when someone says multiculturalism, I'm thinking of, we're talking about races. And so there's a fear there that people are thinking, well, if you're talking about the return of the strong gods and race is a strong god, then are we about to go back to the 20s, the 30s? What's happening here? So when we're talking multiculturalism, I think it's really important that we define what we mean by that. What is the culture, and does it involve race? And I guess those three questions. One more: is race a strong god?
It can be, for sure. It certainly was in Germany in the 1930s, and it has been in our own history in the past. I think multiculturalism came in strongly. Its origins were in, I think one of the first times it was used is in the Hawking Report on foreign missions in the 1930s. And it really had a lot of its origins in missionaries who were, they were going to convert the world in one generation, and they didn't do it. And a lot of the failure, they came back and they wanted to think about their ministry as a kind of sharing in good works rather than converting. And they developed this idea of multiculturalism. But I think it was adopted in the United States in the 1980s as a way of covering over what was essentially what is the essential wound in American society, which is the black-white divide. So it was a way of covering that over. So we're not going to talk about black and white. We're going to talk about multiculturalism. It was a lot easier for white folks to talk about multiculturalism than it was for white folks to talk about Jim Crow or what we're now seeing coming back, which is talking about reparations. I mean, reparations is based on a strong God of justice. I'm not in favor of reparations because I don't think they're just. I don't think Barack Obama's children should get money from taxes paid by some working stiff in Richmond who happens to be white. But I do think I've always thought that multiculturalism and diversity, those were all kind of soft terms that were used to talk about, to avoid talking about one of the real hard questions in American life.
You know, Rusty,
I would say the only real there is multiculturalism in the sense that Black Americans are a distinct stream of American culture. Whereas I think, you got these Mexican young guys whose parents and grandparents came to Texas 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, and they grew up, they're born here, they grew up here. They drive around their pickup trucks with the gun rack in the back and the American flag.
Amen.
Wearing cowboy boots. And, I think of, people were very pessimistic about Italians and Irish and Germans and all these weirdo Eastern European people with strange names you couldn't pronounce ever come real Americans.
Yeah.
And that was the case in the 20s and 30s. And lo and behold, but I do think the African American culture is distinct and remains distinct. So I accept multiculturalism on those terms.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what do you think it is that's making them distinct? Just the slavery itself, that was the way that they were brought into America. What's distinct about that?
Slavery, racial oppression for 100 years after the end of the Civil War. And then, to live in the, if you will, could be radical here, to live on the kind of plantation of the post-1960s welfare system.
Oof.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Those are all very. Now that's not only Black Americans.
Sure.
I mean, there are white folks in West Virginia that are getting aids for dependents with children.
Yep.
And all that, food stamps and all that sort of thing. But living as I do in New York City, it's very obvious that in many urban areas of America, that welfare system allowed for the evolution of Black culture in a way that is distinct.
Rusty, what do you see?
Not necessarily in a positive way, my friend, but it's a reality.
Yeah.
Rusty, what do you see as the solution? I mean, we talk on our show. We started our show to be able to talk about the gospel and politics. Why is Jesus Lord over politics? And it seems to me like the only way out of the decline of what's going on in our country is through like reformation and revival, like repentance. What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, revival, repentance. I mean, I guess I recount in the book this experience I had. I was in this church in Omaha, Nebraska. It was a Black-white church that were merged together out of financial necessity. And, one of the elders of the church, Black man, retired Secret Service, law enforcement, all that sort of thing. He had a screening of Tuskegee Airmen. And it was just such a traumatizing experience for him to watch the film, because how could we have treated those Black men that way?
right.
I'm like, whatever is kind of to me, it's not forgiveness. It's just a sense of solidarity that we're all part of the same country. And so we share benefits, we share burdens, we share even past sins.
That's what we're going to have to be saying about the abortion take right now. How did we do this?
Yeah. How did we do this?
How did we,
Covenant responsibility.
We is a very powerful word, and when I listen to politicians, I'm very sensitive to whether they use the we word, because I think the American people are desperate for it.
All right.
I mean, like I say, there are plenty of activists, progressive activists, who are maybe beyond the pale. But in my experience, most people in our country, they want to be part of a shared project.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the same as, we're different from, we don't, our salvation of our souls is not dependent upon the United States of America.
Right.
But we rightly want in this world to be part of things that are noble and just. And I think that, again, I think this is where I think the churches and Christian folks have an important contribution to make to the renewal of the country.
How are you paying for health care, and how's it working out for you? If it's working perfectly, great. If not, listen closely, because I have a solution for you, a biblical solution. Samaritan Ministries is a community of Christians who pay one another's medical bills. Here's how it works. When a medical need arises, you choose the provider that's right for you and have a say in the treatment you receive, even if it's a non-conventional approach. Your medical bills are shared with fellow members, and your need is covered in prayer. It's affordable. You can join anytime, even today. Learn more today at SamaritanMinistries.org/crosspolitic. That's SamaritanMinistries.org/crosspolitic.
Return of the Strong Gods, nationalism, populism, and the future of the West. Go get it.
Yeah.
R.R. Reno. It's a great book. Very helpful. Rusty, thank you so much for joining us on Cross Politic.
It's been great. And thanks for your ministry.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.
Hi, I'm Luke Ritchie. Wrong timeline. Okay, that's better. Time travel mechanics can get a little bit tricky. I'm Luke Ritchie, Chief Visionary Officer of Gravity Jack. In 2009, we founded Gravity Jack and essentially patented AR. What I'm about to tell you about is a vision that was 14 years in the making. War Tribe of Benjamin. This is a game that feels so real, it might be. It's a genre-defining game for AR and mobile and the Apple Vision Pro. We've integrated artificial intelligence not just into the characters in the game, but actually in the business model of War Tribe. So I love augmented reality games. They're one of my favorites. But the problem is it seems like they've added AR as an afterthought into the game. What if you sat down for 14 years and planned the entire thing around augmented reality? Games make a ton of money, and typically that money doesn't end up in the pocket of the players. We intend to change that. Lastly, and this is important, half the world has never and never will be targeted by big tech for an AI, natural language processing engine. We're definitely going to change that. War Tribe of Benjamin has gameplay like you've never seen before. We have portals opening everywhere, we have holographic communication, but what's really cool too is the world of 2133 is accurately geo-overlaid on the world of today. We're laser focused on ROI for our shareholders, which is you. One of the things we're doing that's super unique that's never been done before is taking 10% of in-game revenue monthly and giving it off as a dividend. The other co-founders and myself started Gravity Jack in 2009, but in 2007 we'd actually sold our company to a gaming company. We've hired the best of the best in terms of game development. Our director of development, product designer are all veterans in the gaming space. And not only that, we're going after a market that's gigantic. We're combining 4 huge major markets: artificial intelligence, augmented reality, translation, and gaming, all for a combined market value of $1.85 trillion.
Our incredible history has led us to be experts in mobile development, augmented reality, AI, gaming, and computer vision. It's been a wild ride here at Gravity Jack. A benefit to being so early on in augmented reality has led to a robust patent portfolio with active revenue and more to come. We've had the privilege of working with clients such as Oscar Mayer, Kraft, Lincoln, Samsung, T-Mobile. We've also worked on non-lethal Department of Defense contracts as well. We were a reference developer for Meta on the Oculus 2 directly, creating a game where other developers look to our source code for best practices. Early on in Gravity Jack's history, we did a game for Double Down Casino, and at the end of that contract, it was grossing $35 million a month. Our robust history has led us to be experts in augmented reality, AI, gaming, computer vision, and mobile development. Play to earn opportunities for the impoverished create an AI language model for unreached people groups, allowing us to have an eventual monopoly on speaking to half the planet. Our focus is shareholder dividends immediately after the game and into the future to create a game that's going to blow the world's minds. And we're pulling people out of poverty and into productivity. So what's the ask? Join the Binyamin.